In 2016, there was a story that strikes you with its brutality. A young girl was harassed by an ex-boyfriend who was becoming more and more dangerous every day. At one point, she even had to go to the police, but what happened next shocked the whole UK. Today, we're going to tell you about what happened to Alice Ruggles. Alice Ruggles was born on December 24, 1991, exactly one day before Christmas. Her parents, Sue and Clave, already had 2 children, and later on another boy was born into the family. Together they lived in the tiny English village of Tur Langton, located in the county of Leicestershire. The family was very friendly. The older children always took care of Bellis and her younger brother. At the local school, the girl began to attend the drama club and quickly fell in love with the acting craft. She took part in many theater productions, and all teachers noted her natural talent. After leaving school at the age of 18, Alice went to Northumbria University, where she studied design. After receiving her degree in 2014, she moved to a town called Gateshead and got a job at Sky, a major British media company. Alice rented an apartment together with her roommates, as it was difficult for her to maintain separate accommodation at first. In October 2015, when the girl was 23, she met a man named Harry Dillon. He came across her Facebook account through a mutual acquaintances page. They started chatting and soon developed a liking for each other. Harry was originally from India and came to the UK on a student program. He transferred from the local Indian university to Queen Margaret University in Edinburgh. After his studies, he decided to stay in England and join the army. After a while, he was deployed to Afghanistan, and it was there that he started chatting with Alice on Facebook. At first, they just texted each other, then they started calling each other several times a week, and eventually a relationship developed between them. They looked forward to the moment when Harry returned to the UK so they could finally meet up. When that happened, they went on a few dates, and Harry made a good impression on Alice. They had a great time, and the mutual affection between them only grew stronger. A few weeks later, however, they were separated again. Harry had to go to Afghanistan again for 2 months, and after that they planned to continue their relationship. Until then, the couple continued to communicate online until Harry finally returned to England in April. He was living in a military unit in Edinburgh, which was almost 200 kilometers from the city where Alice lived. Despite this, Harry tried to travel to see her at every opportunity. A few months after Harry's return to England, Alice invited him to a family party, and it seemed to everyone that their relationship was only getting stronger. As time passed, Alice's acquaintances began to notice a dramatic change in her behavior. Before, she was always cheerful, sociable, and positive. But every day something changed in her. The girl withdrew into herself, was depressed most of the time, and stopped spending time with friends. She basically stopped communicating with them, even on social media, and no one could figure out what was going on with her. Alice also became irascible, and at some point she quarreled with her flatmates. The girl packed her things and moved into the apartment of her work colleague. Family and friends of Alice began to guess that the reason for such a drastic change was her new boyfriend, Harry. At first, she herself was reluctant to share the problems in their relationship, but over time it was simply impossible to hide them. As it turned out, Harry was not that good-natured and caring man, which he was in the first months after meeting. The longer the relationship lasted, the more he tried to control every aspect of Alice's life. Harry was against her going out with friends and socializing with other men, even if they were her old acquaintances and coworkers. He started following her social media correspondences and constantly accused her of Alice wanting to cheat on him. Every time she was socializing with her friends or going out with them, Harry would throw a scandal. But more interestingly, at the same time, Harry began to cheat on her almost openly, meeting women from Tinder for one-night stands with no strings attached. After that, he often told Alice about these women to make her jealous. It even got to the point that in August, one of these women texted Alice on social media. At this point, the girl decided to dump Harry, but he was completely unwilling to let her go. He flooded Ally with messages and calls in which he tried to get her back by any means necessary. At first, he said he loved her, cried into the phone, and promised to change for the better. Then he began to openly manipulate the girl, promising to kill her and pin all the blame on her. It even came to direct threats. It turned out that Harry secretly from Alice photographed her when she changed clothes. The man threatened to put these pictures on the internet if she did not return to him. Eventually, Alice decided to just ignore him, at which point Harry changed tactics. He started calling her friends and family and asking them to talk sense into the girl. After realizing that this wasn't working either, he started writing her paper letters with poems about his love for her. However, soon he once again turned to threats and blackmail. But Alice also did not respond to these letters. A little later, it turned out that Harry had managed to hack into her Facebook account and was monitoring all her correspondence. From there, he learned that since September, Alice had started communicating with a man named Mike, who was an army officer and was in another country at the time. Harry was furious. He started writing to Mike about how Alice was still in love with him and sleeping with him, and wrote nasty things about her. But by then, Mike already knew about Harry and didn't pay any attention to what he said. He continued his relationship with Alice, and it seemed that the girl managed to get out of the whole situation with Harry. She became sociable, cheerful, and happy again. Alas, this did not last long. On September 30, Harry left her a voicemail in which he begged her to pick up the phone. Alice ignored it, and then he decided to go to her home. The man drove 2.5 hours from his military unit to her apartment, but then he behaved strangely. First, he rang the doorbell and ran away. Alice was in the house, but she didn't open the door because she didn't see anyone through the peephole. The situation repeated itself several more times. Then, hours later, Harry climbed over the fence and came to her bedroom window. Alice lived on the first floor of a 2-story house with a fenced-in area. Harry knocked on the window and hid, leaving a box of chocolates and a bouquet on the windowsill, which frightened Alice, and she immediately realized that Harry was behind it all. Except that when she went to the window, she saw the man hiding out of her sight for a moment. He didn't end there. Hiding in her backyard, Harry recorded several creepy voicemails. Their contents caused Alice to truly panic. One of them started with the words, "You once said that guys like me end up killing people." After those words, he began to repeatedly say that he didn't want to kill her. Alice got the impression from his voice that he was primarily trying to convince himself by what he said. Finally, he wished her good night and left. All this was enough for Alice to go to the police. After what had happened, she began to seriously fear for her life, and didn't know how else to keep herself safe from Harry. The operator offered her 2 options to solve the problem. She could get a restraining order against Harry, or she could ask the police to issue an official notice in his name, known in Britain by the acronym PIN. It allowed the police to arrest a man if he approached or contacted Alice. The girl chose that option. The next day, the police came to her house, took a statement, and assured her that Harry would now face consequences if he bothered her again. Some time later, a police officer called the military unit and informed the officer in charge of the measures taken against Harry. Remarkably, the police did not contact him personally even by phone, let alone a personal visit, although they were legally obliged to do so. Upon learning that Alice had contacted the police, he became angry and wrote her another letter. Along with it, he sent her a whole box of things that reminded him of her. In the letter, he said that her complaint had caused his phone, tablet, and laptop to be taken away from him. He also promised not to bother her again, but Alice knew for sure. He wouldn't settle down that easily. The first time she'd contacted the police, she'd been told to be sure to call if Harry contacted her again. So she did. The girl told about the letter and the box of things, but the operator didn't know what action to take in this case. So she did. The girl told about the letter and the box of things, but the operator did not know what measures to take in this case. Moreover, he asked Alice herself what action she expected from them. In the end, he promised that some other employee would call her back. Of course, this response from the police shocked Alice, and she had no idea what to do next. A few hours later, an officer called her back and listened to the whole story. Next, he asked if she wanted the police to arrest Harry. And this is where Alice made a fatal mistake. She took pity on him and answered in the negative. However, even if Harry had been arrested, he would have received no punishment. He would just be held for a while at the station and released. After that, Alice realized that the police could not help her in her situation, so she had to rely only on herself. On October 12, 5 days after contacting the police, Alice was still depressed and scared. She hoped to take her mind off these troubling thoughts over the weekend. Mike was coming to visit her, and they planned to spend the next few days together. That night, Alice came home from work. Her roommate wasn't home. The girl started to get ready for bed, texting Mike about the upcoming meeting. But she didn't know that all this time Harry was standing in the yard of her house and watching. Taking advantage of the fact that Alice had her window ajar, he climbed into her bedroom and headed for the kitchen. There he took a knife and went to the bathroom where the girl was. Further events unfolded rapidly. Harry gave her 24 stabbing blows, from which Alice died almost instantly. After that, he got out of the apartment, got into his car, and drove back to his military unit. Less than an hour later, Alice's roommate returned home and found the front door locked from the inside. She knocked several times, expecting Alice to open it for her, but she did not. So the neighbor went into the backyard to knock on her bedroom window, but what she saw shocked her. Through the open window, the neighbor saw Alice lying on the bathroom floor covered in blood. She immediately called the police and in a panic told them what had happened. During the call, she also uttered, "We knew it was coming to this." Her ex is a real psychopath. Less than 2 minutes from the start of the call, the neighbor heard police sirens approaching. Along with them came paramedics who pronounced Alice dead. It was immediately obvious to them that this was a homicide. In connection with the fact that the neighbor called Harry Dillon as a potential killer, the police immediately began to search for him. By punching the numbers of his car, they found that the man drove from Edinburgh to Newcastle. That day his car was caught on several surveillance cameras. In a few hours, police arrived at the military unit and arrested Harry. He was taken to the station and began to interrogate. The man admitted that he had gone to see Alice, but denied any involvement in the murder. According to him, he had gone there to talk to her. She allegedly went outside to him and punched him in the face while talking to him. Next, Harry allegedly got into a car and drove back to the unit. But detectives quickly determined that his story had nothing to do with reality. They found out from surveillance cameras that Harry arrived at Alice's house before she even got home from work. He parked the car and waited. But that's not all. Investigators examined his cell phone and found that while Harry was in the car, he had been texting a random girl on Tinder and arranging to meet up with her that same night. Detectives also found traces of blood on the steering wheel of Harry's car. An analysis showed that the blood belonged to Alice. Furthermore, the man stole her cell phone and took it with him, Alice. What's more, the man stole her phone and took it with him, causing the geolocation of the device to completely match the killer's movements that day. All of this was enough to bring a murder charge and bring the case to trial. However, the first hearing didn't take place until almost a year later, in April 2017. Harry's lawyers realized that with such a set of evidence against their client, it was necessary to invent a new story. As a result, the man claimed that he actually went to Alice's house to pick up his belongings. But there was an argument between them. Alice then allegedly took a knife and attacked him, but accidentally stabbed herself 24 times. Afterward, he watched her die and even listened to her last words. She allegedly stated that she hated her family. Of course, this delusional story was not taken seriously. Moreover, during the court hearings, another gruesome fact came to light. Before the murder, Harry came several times to Alice's house, sneaked into the backyard and took pictures. According to the prosecution, he had meticulously planned the murder in advance. 11 days later, the court handed down a guilty verdict. Life in prison with the possibility of applying for parole after 22 years. During the reading of the verdict, the judge noted that Harry did not show an ounce of remorse or pity. Instead, he was only focused on making up the most believable story possible. During the trial, another gruesome detail from Harry's past came to light. 3 years before these events, his ex-girlfriend had obtained a restraining order against him because he had pursued her in the same way he would later pursue Alice. But the police simply didn't know about it. After the murder, the police were heavily criticized by the public and the media. They were accused of failing to protect Alice from a dangerous psychopath by letting the matter drop. 2 officers were later disciplined. The army was also criticized. The public was outraged at the fact that such an unstable and dangerous person had been taken there. In addition, the leadership took no action against Harry when Pin was released against him. A short while later, Alice's family launched a foundation named in her honor. Its purpose was to work to ensure that victims of stalking receive instant and appropriate help from the police. Alice's case showed that law enforcement agencies are simply unable to provide such protection. Therefore, changes in legislation were needed. In 2019, a law was passed that makes it easier to grant injunctions against people who stalk their victims. Despite this, Alice's family continues to work on the fund and hope that it will help to change the situation in the country for the better. Now, all her relatives and friends believe that this tragedy could have been avoided if the police had taken their duties more seriously.